Hi, my name is Annika Kahn-Grevstad, and I'm the writer and director of My Only Friend is a Robot Named Beans, a sci-fi comedy starring Midori Francis. Here's how we created an entirely CGI robot on an independent short film budget.
Hello.
I wrote this film back in 2020 at the height of the pandemic, and I was seeing the ways that our world felt like it was becoming increasingly individualized. Things like self-checkout lanes and grocery delivery services and remote work, all of these things that are putting us more and more in our own little bubbles. I think we see so much sci-fi that's about dystopias and the ways that technology can go wrong. And in this film, me and my team were really interested in exploring what it looks like if there's a robot that's designed to bring out the best in us. And to me, the best in us is our ability to connect with other people.
Do you want one of yours? Yeah.
One of the initial sparks for this film was actually the color palette. I'd seen the inside of an abalone shell, which is this sort of like iridescent pastel palette, and I knew that I wanted to make a sci-fi film with that kind of color scheme. I also knew that I wanted it to be really retro-futuristic. It's set 10 years into the future, and we see the ways that these retro styles keep coming around, and so I really wanted to lean into that with the design of this film. Patricia took the color palette and this retro-futuristic direction, and she really ran with it and built this beautiful world for Ruby to live in. One of the biggest challenges for this film was creating Beans, the character.
You have named me Chill Your Beans.
Wait, undo.
Thank you.
Undo.
I love my new name.
In pre-production, we discussed maybe going a practical direction, which would be like, you know, a kid in a robot costume or a puppet on top of a Roomba. And ultimately, we decided that for it to have the functionality that we wanted, it would be too expensive to create something realistic on the indie short film budget. So we decided to go with a totally computer-generated approach. I was so lucky to have Sky Mahaffey as one of the producers on this project. She's an entirely self-taught visual effects artist. She taught herself how to use Blender during the pandemic, and she went from basically knowing how to make like a 3D donut to an entirely CGI character by the end of this film. At the beginning of this process, we worked with a character designer named Lovable Bannon. I had given them the initial inspirations of this world we were playing in. One of the things that we really drew on was the old retro iMac as the design inspiration for its head. But they gave us a ton of options to start with, and then we narrowed in on what kind of characteristics we were liking, like sort of this cute overall shape from one of the designs, and then this round screen from another one. And based on our feedback, Levon honed in on what ultimately became the design of Beans. They also did a bunch of explorations of range of movement and facial expressions and color palettes, all of these things that helped us ultimately decide on what the character would look like before we even began production. Although the character was entirely generated in post-production, we knew that we wanted to have a reference on set, mostly for our actor Midori Francis to act across from.
That's really accurate.
Because essentially every scene in this film is just her and this robot character. We worked with a prop master, Ariel Kaplan, who created a green screen version of the robot, which we lovingly named Green Beans. Green Beans was basically like an upside-down trash can on wheels with a cake Tupperware for its head and little cardboard cutout eyes and wire arms that we could move around. We dragged Green Beans around for 3 days on set, and he was basically like the stand-in for the robot character. So for every shot, we would get a version of it with Green Beans as a reference, and then we would get a clean plate, which we actually used for compositing. Sky was also getting a bunch of different measurements on set, so she would get a reference of the reflections, she would get a 360-degree image of every position that Beans was in each of the shots. She would get measurements of the distance to camera from the robot, the height of the camera, the focal length of the lens, basically any information that she was going to need in the post process to match the visual effects to the shot footage. Everybody on the crew fell in love with Green Beans, and he worked perfectly, and then after the last shot on the last day, he tipped over and his head fell off. Once we got through principal photography, it was time to bring the robot character to life in the post-process. Sky took the character sketches and modeled them in a 3D space in the software Blender. We went through a bunch of different versions of this model until we landed on one that we liked, with all of the details in the head, on the wheels, and all of the different surfaces and textures. And once we had that, she rigged Beans for animation by creating an armature of individual bones to represent each of the robot's joints, an axle for the wheels, and basically got it so that the robot was moving through 3D space like we wanted it to. And then once we had that model moving like we wanted, it was time to composite it into our footage. First, Sky built basically like a 3D version of the set in Blender, including specific placements of the lights that we used on set and the specific placement of the camera in 3D space so that the shot of the robot would exactly match the plate that it was being composited into. We also exported a specular layer out of Blender to give like the plastic the shine that you would expect in a real 3D robot. So then we brought those Blender exports into After Effects, and that's where we did things like adding grain, blurring and sharpening, and all of the different little textural things that really made it match the footage that we were compositing it into. This whole animation process was really hand in hand with the edit. So the first version of the edit, we had a really preliminary model done, but that was it. And so the first edit was just like footage with a PNG being crudely animated around. And then once we had a rough cut, then we kind of had our first model in place with a really early stage animation. Every time that it blinked was a conversation. Where does it change its expressions? When does it move? How does it move? All of those things were choices that we were making throughout the post process.
You did it! You did it!
And then we worked with an amazing actor and comedian, Alex Songja, who voiced the robot Beans. We had a bunch of other incredible visual effects artists that helped with cleanups, the hologram projections, additional compositing. From pre-production to post-production, it really took a team and a lot of trial and error to make this film. If you haven't seen the film yet, you can check it out on my channel or on the sci-fi platform Dust. And if you have any other questions about how we made this film, drop them in the comments below.